Welcome back, Fate of the Game viewers, to another edition of Vocal Co-op. I'm your host, Dalton Miller, and joining me as always, my illustrious co-host, Jed Pressgrove.
How's it going, guys?
This week we have a special guest with us, the newest member of FateOfTheGame.com, Seth Parsley.
I'm glad to be with you guys.
This week we got to pick the topic that seems to have garnered a lot of attention as of late. There have been some controversial, I'd say, reviews, not only about Grand Theft Auto 5, but going back to Dragon's Crown at Polygon.com. And it just seems like this is kind of snowballed throughout the year. And it's not basically based around the same, more or less, hot button issue. But it does bring about an interesting question. And that is, what should a video game review contain? So Seth, since you're our special guest, I'm going to ask you first. What should a video game review contain?
Okay. Well, whenever I start to watch a video review or start to read a review, I'm more or less looking for gameplay. I want to know about the game systems. I want to know about how fun it is or isn't to play. And it seems like a big trend in gaming nowadays, or game reviews nowadays, is that they tend to spend a lot of time focused on story. And that with a game like Last of Us or Telltale's Walking Dead, that's fine. But I also want to know about the gameplay.
Right. Which is, completely valid.
Yeah.
Jed, what about you?
Well, gameplay is always going to be number one in a sense because people, they want to have a good time while playing a game. And they want to make sure that this mechanic works well or that it's not screwed up, which is perfectly understandable.
Right.
To stick with this line of reasoning, let's look at some of the GTA 5 reviews. Now, I can't call all of them out by name, but I noticed while reading some of the reviews that a lot of them were just talking about these PR statements that I'd already heard about the game, like expanding the world, getting to switch between three guys, how smooth that is, how, you get bored with this guy, you go to this guy. But you know what? One thing I didn't really read about hardly at all in any of these reviews, hey, what are the shooting mechanics like? What are the driving mechanics like? What are the melee mechanics like? Because guess what? All those mechanics have been like shit for a really long time in GTA, and I wanted to know, hey, what are they like now?
Yeah, at least I can agree with you. At least this generation. I mean, I feel like San Andreas probably had the best mechanics and shooting that the console versions of GTA have had as a whole. Once they abandoned the lock-on system of old that we used to love so dearly. I fucking hate lock-on systems, people. So anyway. For me, honestly, just off the bat, I don't really want a video game review to have a whole lot of those personal hot button topics and agendas contained within. Now, it's fine if that's the way you see things and you believe it, but that's not really what you're reviewing here. You're not spreading the news of a new religious group or abandoning another. You're not there to give your socio-political commentary based on what is or isn't in a game's art style, in a game's storyline, in a game's characters. Because at the end of the day, video games are another form of art entertainment, right? Just like movies, just like magazines, just like books. And to me, yeah, you're free to have your opinion. You're free to have your opinion on that. But that should not affect the score that a game is given, not in any way, for me especially. And that's just kind of my thoughts on it, just to open up. Seth, you want to expand any more? What's something that you never want to see in a video game?
Well, with the game, let's take Last of Us for example. When I look at the review, I don't want to see them talking about how women are or aren't portrayed, if it's not relevant. If it's relevant, then I understand.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, Last of Us had some of the strongest female characters, but they weren't just kind of like a Michelle Rodriguez, I'm gonna punch a dude in the face.
Yeah.
They were people.
Yeah. Well, nobody wants bad writing to the point of a shitty horror movie where the girl character continually fucking falls down over a root or some shit and has to be rescued every 15 minutes. And that could be construed as sexism, right? portraying females as weakness. To me, that's just fucking bad writing.
Yeah.
Well, it is. Yeah, it is. But here's the argument that a lot of people make. They might actually agree and say, okay, maybe in and of itself it is bad writing, but maybe this contributes to, potentially, well, I don't even know if that's really the right way to put it, but contributes to some kind of sexist feelings that some people harbor or whatever.
Okay.
That it can reinforce these feelings. Now, getting back to what you just said about, okay, I don't want to read a review that talks about these sorts of things unless it's relevant.
Yeah.
I kind of have to go back to a Yahtzee review of, the Metroid, The Other M.
Mm.
And he talks about how, in this game, Samus just seems like a weak person, compared to the other games. And so it kind of defeats the whole purpose of having a game centered around a female character if she's just, I'm just crying and stuff like that. I've never played the game. That's the
not physically weak, but she's psychologically weak.
Yeah, something like that. But that's the impression that I got from his review, is that Samus used to be, an impressive, strong female character, and here she's reduced to crap,
Yeah.
Now, here's the other thing. I don't have a problem with people talking about, the female tropes or whatever, but here's the thing. A lot of that stuff is contrived. It's manufactured to get views. Because sexism sells. That's almost like the new violence in video games. You remember back in the 90s when everybody was like, man, our kids are going to be screwed up if they play video games.
Yep, I'm screwed
And
up.
maybe they are. Okay, maybe they are. But now it's not, now of course we had the recent shooting and Fox News, kind of talking about video games, the guy playing video games and everything. Right. But that's just like an occurrence that happens every once in a while. But the main commentary now... The main commentary now is about the sexism. And it's not just, sometimes it feels like it's not just a personal opinion. Sometimes it feels like, okay, if I say this, then people are going to react to it. I want to get this many more comments. Which I can understand, I can understand.
From a business perspective, yeah, but from a journalism perspective, that's kind of bullshit, Of course you want to have your article be interesting, right? But to purposefully put that kind of content out there knowing that you're going to draw that kind of crowd and that you're going to start this hate war in the comments, and then it's going to spill over into Twitter, and then it's going to be on Gaff, and then next thing you know there's a bunch of weird GIFs going around, and it all just ascends down that terrible internet fucking toilet, right?
I mean, as a professional in gaming journalism, why would you resort to tactics that trolls on forums use?
Okay.
I mean, I can't tell you how many forum topics I've seen on the GTA 5 forums on GameFAQs in the past few days about, there's not a female lead character that you can play as, and this and that and the other thing. So, I mean...
Well, I mean, not to defend this, but to put another perspective out there, I mean, for a while, and even still... There are a lot of times very few black main characters in video games.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there are great ones. Specifically, one for me was Prototype 2. That guy was awesome.
Lee Everett?
Yeah. And Lee Everett in Walking Dead, one of my favorite characters. That was my game of the year 2 years ago. I thought he was a great character. I loved, his kind of internal struggle that, allowed the player to kind of feel out what your own personal choices would be, but still enveloping you into the...
A surprisingly good black character was actually featured in Final Fantasy 13.
Really?
Saz.
Okay.
He was, most of the characters in that game were little whiny babies. He was the only... And he actually had a rough background. Something happened with his daughter. I can't remember exactly what, but he always had this, air of maturity, okay, let's everyone calm down and stop being little bitches about everything. He didn't say that, but... He had a very mature outlook, and yeah, that's great. But, talking about these kind of, the racial issue and then the gender issue. Okay, so we got to get back to the GTA 5 thing.
Right.
Okay.
There we go.
All right. So I was reading this one article, and I guess it was from Polygon. I mean, who else? They're the ones that, they had that article about Dragon's Crown and about, it's as if they had never seen tits in a game before.
Right,
right. Which I can understand. It was written.
Did y'all play The Witcher 2 at all?
Well, yeah. And that's the thing, too. That's something that's really odd. The Witcher 2, man, I have not seen more sex in any other game. But that game gets no flack for it whatsoever, man. It's amazing. That game is bulletproof,
And it
man.
does not portray women in the most.
Well, here's the thing about The Witcher 2. It does have a lot of sex and tits, but a lot of those women characters, I mean, you know, they got. I mean, you know, you got to fear them, you know, because
Some of them are strong, for sure.
There are definitely strong characters in there. So it's I guess maybe that's why maybe it balances it out for people, or maybe the people who like to complain about things don't ever play The Witcher 2. I don't know which one it is, but anyway, okay, so when I was reading this Polygon review of GTA 5, I noticed some emphasis on, okay, there are no female protagonists, which is something that had already been pointed out by a lot of shit, you know, in the last few weeks, okay? Now, here's the thing. Who really gives a shit, okay? Unless you're trying to make an issue out of it, okay? Because it's part of this commentary that's been running through a lot of things. And hey, I can throw this into the GTA 5 game. This is going to be the most popular game out there. So if I say something like this, then people are going to read it. Why doesn't anyone ever ask the obvious question? The racial stereotyping in GTA 5, in GTA games in general. Or how about the violence in the game? Now, I'm not saying that the violence, if you play a violent game, that's going to make you kill someone. But it brings to mind this interesting review from The Escapist on GTA 5. And the guy was basically saying, you know what? I didn't really like these characters at all. They were just completely evil, and I had no pleasure in playing as them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so what about that? I mean, does that fall into the personal beliefs category, or is that something like that's, you know, genuine?
Yeah, well, I mean, that goes back to moral choice in video games, right? And that's something that, you know, really started to be explored. I mean, it's not that choice hadn't been there in the past, but I'm just going to take KOTOR, the first Knights of the Old Republic game as an example, maybe even Fable 1 if you want. The same thing. You had those choices where you could do the bad thing or do the good thing, right? And not only did it kind of give players kind of a new outlook on things. Like, okay, well, I can be like the white knightest of Jedis ever, or I can be super evil and my appearance will change and I'll get red veins and glowing eyes and all that cool shit. But it gave players a choice, right? So I can see where he's coming from, saying that I really don't want to do the bad thing all the time, but the bad thing is the objective. There are no other objectives. But then again, I can see that this is a fantasy. Almost all video games are fantasy. I'm not sure I played one that was like a true story or anything, ever. Not that they don't exist. There are historical games, right? But that just comes down to one man's taste, and that's fine. That's not really something based on his belief system. Crime is wrong. Murder is wrong. That's not really a religious belief or anything else. That's just basic morality.
Something that he felt while playing the game.
Something that he felt. Yeah. Something we teach our youngest children is it's wrong to hurt people. Yeah. It's wrong to.
So that's what we want, though. We want someone's genuine reaction to a game in a review.
All right.
And okay, now here's something that's interesting. In that Escapist review, okay, I really think, okay, so it got a 7 out of 10. You know, most of the reviews have been 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 10. I mean, now, of course, there were people calling for this person to be fired for giving it a 9 out of 10, which is crazy. but it's because they got so many 10 out of 10s.
Yeah, that's right.
But this one got a 7 out of 10, and it's amazing they didn't call for this person to be fired, you know. But okay, I really felt like part of that score reflected the guy's distaste with, you know, having to be such a contemptible human being. And so this brings up some things. What should go into a review score? Or, also, do we even need review scores? Does it get people thinking too much about that number and not thinking enough about what the guy actually said? Or the girl actually said?
Seth, what do you think, man? Tell me. Tackle the first part first, I guess. That's a loaded question, Jed. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Double-barreled.
To clarify, the first part was, what did you say? Like, because you said so many things.
I know, man. This is terrible for your first time. I know.
It's fine.
Basically, okay. So if you like totally detest a character that you have to become, you know, that kind of brings up the question: should that play a part into the review score, or should it be more focused on just the technical or gameplay aspects?
I don't really think so. in my opinion, because when you, all right, say for instance, if you have someone who does not like that type of game play that kind of a game to review it, they're obviously going to be biased against it. So like, as I personally gave The Last of Us a 10 out of 10 because I liked most everything about it. But someone who maybe not have been quite as into the story or liked where it ended up, they might have given it a lower score just because, they didn't like it as much. Like I said, it really kind of goes back to, maybe it kind of touches on who should be reviewing a certain type of game. Because if someone's primarily a sports gamer, they're not gonna, have the full insight to review GTA. Right. As someone who's played all the GTAs.
You're not going to have your JRPG specialist review John Madden Football. It will not turn out well for John Madden Football.
No.
But here's the thing. Would it be interesting to read
his review?
And you would sure as hell and you would sure as hell get an honest opinion.
These guys keep hitting me before my turn's over.
So what is it? What are we really looking for? Are we looking for interesting, honest opinions, or are we looking for things that conform to what we think someone should be saying?
For me, Jed, it all goes back to the beginning of this conversation, and that's gameplay mechanics. If those facets, if they are just that blatant that they bother you to the point where they overshadow the mechanics of a game, then it's a problem. Then it should be mentioned. If you detest playing as the character and carrying out the actions that much, if you're forcing yourself to finish that game in order to review it just because of the moral applications of what he's doing on the screen, I mean, then yeah, I guess that you're not enjoying yourself, right? That's the fun factor. The fun factor that's part of what games will always be about, right? It's fun, hopefully. Papers, Please is not about that, though, right?
No, it's not. It is not.
Read Jed's review of Papers, Please.
And read other reviews about it, because even people who like Papers, Please a lot of them will straight up admit this game is not fun. It's miserable.
Yeah. So to me, that has to be the basis of a review. It has to be the basis of a review. The mechanics, does the game perform? Is it fun to play? Are the mechanics enjoyable? Because you're going to be doing them over and over and over. The art style, the music, I don't know, I guess pseudo-belief system overtones that maybe enter in or not in a game. To me, that's tertiary. That's your opinion part of the article. And I want that in there. But I don't want it to affect the score negatively or positively. I don't want it to say, well, I really enjoyed the way that the artist did this one redhead's breast, so I'm going to give him a little bit higher score on graphics just because those boobs look so great. Like, that is not a reason to give a game a better score.
So this gets to the second part of that double-barreled question that I threw out there. Okay, are review scores necessary? Are they beneficial? I mean, the thing is, if everyone is looking at the number, then are they really paying attention to what the point of the review is? So that's the question. And our friend Kathy, the indie gamer chick, she completely hates review scores because of this. She's like, how can you distill your opinion into a number? But see, I have a different take on it. I'm like, okay, does the number distract the reader from what's actually being said?
It depends. And I think it comes down to the individual, right? How much stock do you put in that number? And what do those numbers mean to you? Of course, we had a good time when we were setting up our site and our formats and our review systems and what each of these numbers translates to. A funny phrase or whatever, lightheartedness. And, at the end of the day, for me, there are 10 points in a game review, period. There always will be. For me, that's just me. I'm an analyst by trade. Like, that's what I've learned over the last few years of my other semi-professional life. Everything is numbers for me. Everything can be quantified, unfortunately. That's just the fact of the matter. That's the way I think. So for video games especially, I mean, the thing that I get hung up on is just because a game gets an 8 or a 7, and it may be your favorite game of all time, that doesn't mean it's a bad game. A 7 is a perfectly good review. That is a perfectly good game. That's a buy. A 7 is a buy. That's a game you can enjoy. You can sit down. It's worth the money. Even a 6 is a game that has positive value to it. there are a lot more lines on the scale than 9, 8, and 10.
Okay.
And that's, I think, what kids and people reading, I think they forget about.
Okay. So now let's let the new guy talk about this for a second. You settle your ass down. Okay. Now, so what do you think? Review scores? What if you came across reviews that didn't have scores? What would that be like, basically? Or would you find yourself missing
It'd be
that score?
a little disconcerting because we're so used to them.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
I know, especially when I was younger and didn't read a lot of reviews, I would just go to the site and scroll to the bottom, see what the score is, or see what the bullet points were. Which sometimes it can, I feel like the score can be distracting because it's easy to go down and just see the scores like, oh, it's a 10, I should buy this. Or, oh, it's a 6, maybe I should, wait a little while for a price drop or something. But I've gotten to the point where most of the time, I try to read everything and correlate that with the score. So just because a game's a 10 doesn't mean I'm going to like it. Because, there could be some game systems that I'm not a fan of. Or there could be something in the story like Grand Theft Auto. Like, I'm not a big fan of, criminal activity. So
I love doing crimes. I love doing crimes.
I wouldn't have assumed that.
Well, say, when I go into a fantasy, I don't want to be like the best, carjacker who just fucks everybody over.
Yeah.
I want to step into somebody's shoes where I can do something good and help people.
Or you want to be, I think what you're trying to say, and I'm not mean to steal it from you, I'll throw it right back. But for me, I want to be more than just a one-note character, right?
Yeah.
Even in a game that has a linear storyline. I still want the character to have more flesh and bone than just, he's a bad guy, he does bad things. Because it's just boring to watch. If I'm sitting there saying, well, he's going to do the bad thing in this, and then it happens, I'm like, okay, well, let's keep going, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, is that not where you're going with that?
Yeah, for the most part.
And let me rewind a little bit back to the review scores thing, because I have something I'd like to share with our audience here. Okay, so about the review scores, there are games that I've reviewed for Fate of the Game, and you know what I think? I'm like, okay, I gave this game a 7, I gave this game an 8, whatever. Should I have given it one number below? Should I have gone to a 7? See, that's one reason why part of me is like, man, screw these scores, man, because I'm second guessing the number, but see, I don't second guess what I said. You see what I mean? Like the words,
I understand completely what
the
you're
words I
talking
don't
about.
second guess at all, but the number I'm like actually aggravated by it a little bit, depending on the game. Some games I'm like, okay, this game is a 9, whatever that means, in this whatever, this system, this scheme that we have, is always going to be a 9, It's never going to be quite a 10. But then there are games where like, okay, is it really an 8? Is it really a 7? And then months later, I'm like, man, I don't want people to think that I was trying to give this too high of a number. I don't want people to judge my review based on that number. I want them to read the damn review,
But that's why it's important that we timestamp our reviews. That's something we do at Fate of the Game. It's very important that at this time when you played this game, this is the score that it was given. Because there are patches, there are downloadable content, there are Game of the Year packs, there are every fucking thing else you can think of as add-ons to a game. There's Super Ultra Street Fighter fucking Fox Edition now, and no telling what else is in that game.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
So we got Star Fox and Street Fighter now.
Exactly,
Wow.
exactly,
Holy shit.
exactly. Yeah, Mega Man's in it too again.
Huh.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Well, I'll be down.
But,
yeah.
it's coming out. It's coming out. 3 months later,
Yeah.
they'll have Mega Edition.
Yeah.
But do you not agree with that? Like that's one reason we timestamp them.
Well, honestly, I haven't been time stamping my stuff unless I
the published date timestamps it alone. But I like that's
there you go. Yeah, well, that's true. That's true.
I annotate everything I put in there just because this is the date and time that I reviewed this game. It may not be the same experience later.
And not to diss the timestamp idea, because it's a good idea, especially for that patch thing. But a lot of times when I think of timestamp, it kind of, for some reason, start thinking of tramp stamp. Maybe that's why I don't like specifically say timestamp in there, because it brings that to mind, and I don't want to think about it. Not that there's anything wrong if you have a tramp stamp. I'm just saying that I don't really want to think about it.
So I agree. There you go. I agree. It would be nice if we could just say, well, here's my opinion on this game. There's no score associated with it. But readers want a score,
and you won't get picked up by Metacritic.
You won't get picked up by Metacritic, and I don't think you can review shit on N4G. But anyway, Kathy Weiss, stop spreading shit into his mind. And stop trying to steal my writers. I like you, girl, but don't fuck with me. Anyway.
Okay, well, I think now is probably the appropriate time to have some closing remarks. So, and look, these closing remarks, they can just be whatever pops in your mind. So, Seth, go, and then we'll just come down. All right, Pikachu. Okay.
That's it. Don't put too much stock in game reviews, guys. By one sentence, wrap that up. Read a review, see what you think. Maybe read a few more. It's always good to get more than one opinion on something, but always reserve a final judgment for yourself.
Okay, well, here's what I've got to say. All this stuff that this guy doesn't like, the personal beliefs, guess what? You're going to see a lot more of it. And here's what I say. You can't stop the train. It's going to keep rolling, okay? Because this is a new style. See, video games, they're changing now. People are starting to take them more seriously, too. And so you're going to see more and more of this stuff. And here's the thing, though. Those reviews where you're just like, oh, man, they're talking about sexism. They're talking about this stuff that I really don't want to read about. Well, a lot of the times, these reviews, they don't even have that much logic behind them in the first place. For instance, the review from Polygon about Dragon's Crown, when they're talking about, the girls with the big tits. Why didn't they ever mention any of the other games in video game history that had big tits?
Yeah, like every one of them?
It's glaring holes like this that make people detest these kind of politically charged articles.
Yeah.
But what if you come across an article that's super intelligent and that talks about things like this? Then you're going to be challenged. You're going to actually going to have to start to think. It's not going to be a knee-jerk response. And that's when the conversation is really going to start getting interesting. And so video game reviews, whether we like it or not, are changing. And we can either, hey, we don't have to take part of the conversation, we can ignore it, or we can become part of the conversation. So
Exactly.
that's my closing remark there.
Well, I don't want us to be irrelevant, so we'll probably be part of that conversation. That's why we're having the show.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Guys, I'm at Tales of Dalton on Twitter. He's at Jed Pressfate. He's at The Real Seth. And we write for fateofthegame.com. Come by, check our shit out. Comment on this video. Tell us what you think. What do you think should be in a video game review? What do you think shouldn't be in there? Do you agree with me? Do you agree with Seth? Do you agree with Jed? We want to know these things. We want to talk to you. So comment on the site. Hit us up on Twitter sometime. Bullshit with us. Until next time, peace.